Write that down. Write that down. Write that down. Write that down.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Write That Down. I'm your host, Justin Knipper. I'm editor at FightGameMedia.com, staff writer at WrestlingObserver.com, F4WOnline.com, and I'll be joined shortly by my co-host, Japan's leading pro wrestling author, historian, broadcast journalist, the one and only Mr. Fumi Saito. So, you've made it to part 4. Part 4 of our profile series on Antonio Inoki has arrived. Today's show picks up where we left off last time. During the mid-1970s, 1974, 1975, 1976, we're going to kind of start around 1974 yet again, go even deeper into Inoki's career, and we're going to finish today's episode around 1985 during his career. On this episode, we went over the nature of the New Japan and WWF relationship, the business relationship that they had between Antonio Inoki and Vince McMahon Sr., and we're going to talk about how Giant Baba and Bruno Sammartino and superstar Billy Graham all fit into that picture at the time. We also did a little deathmatch trivia involving Inoki and Umanosuke Ueda before we dived deep into Inoki's pretty famous, pretty well-known rivalry with Bob Backlund for the WWF World Heavyweight title, which he won. He did win it in Tokushima, 1979. This happened. We talk about that too. We talk about the very dense and somewhat convoluted explanation of Inoki winning the title and then vacating the title, even though it was never recognized in North America. We'll get into that. We also but we really talk about how important the Japanese print media was during that time too, and how important it was in spinning the angle to the Japanese fan base, because there were two different sets of realities, you could say, in Japan for the Japanese fan base and for in the States, for what was going on in the States and what the fans were told and what the fans weren't told. Before the end of today's episode, we also talked about Inoki's rivalry with Stan Hansen, and we also talked quite a bit about his storied history with Mr. Hulk Hogan. We talked about the infamous 1983 IWGP Finals match between Inoki and Hogan, and the controversial finish. I also asked, and it's worth thinking about, did Hulkamania really start in Tokyo, or did it start in New York? Listen to the episode and then decide for yourself. Okay, so next week, tune in for part 5. It's going to be our final episode. We're going to talk about a lot of Inoki's late career in the late 80s into the 90s, what he did to wrestling in the late 90s, early 2000s, what he did outside of pro wrestling at that time too. It's going to be another action-packed, very interesting episode. That's for next week. Also, one announcement. If you have questions for me or for Fumi, it could be about anything. It could be about a topic that we've talked about recently or in the past, or anything. Apropos nothing. Email me, Justin Knipper, Knipper, at gmail.com, okay? Fumi and I are going to do a bonus question and answer episode for the Fight Game Media Patreon. So if you have something you'd like to ask Fumi, send me an email. We'll get it set up, and we're going to do a special question and answer only show exclusively for the Fight Game Media Network Patreon. You can only listen to that if you are a patron. So, and if you already are a patron, thanks for being a patron, and you will have some bonus material coming your way very soon. So, enough of me babbling. Let's get into some Antonio Inoki talk. Hello from Burbank.
Hello from Tokyo.
Okay, part 4, Antonio Inoki legacy today. We left off talking about WWF, late 70s at the time. Antonio Inoki was involved. Vince McMahon Sr. was involved. Bob Backlund and Antonio Inoki had a series of matches, and it led to some pretty big news in the late 70s,
title matches.
early 80s. Yeah. But let's kind of recap what we talked about last week around 1974 is what we really focused on in the mid 70s.
Okay. Vince McMahon Vince McMahon Senior came to Japan and announced the new partnership with New Japan Pro Wrestling, of course, at the time. And so became the business partner. So Inoki finally have this strong connection with major company in America. Up until then, Inoki had Korogach, as a book, not a match booker, but the booking talent. They were bringing Korogach's connection friends, wrestlers from from places in Florida, or the Korogach's friends, or the wrestlers from Europe, or some wrestlers from Montreal. Tiger Jeet Singh, of course, and Rougeau's people from Montreal,
Rene
and a little bit
Goulet,
from yeah,
Billy
and
Robinson.
Jack Rougeau, or you had Raymond Rougeau before he was famous as a WWF tag team, and those people were here, and and Maguire twins, of course, was an attraction, and Japanese against Japanese, Japanese superstar against Japanese superstar was a strong card for New Japan, whereas Giant Baba always had all the superstars from America, and we talked about that last time, and the the first WWF Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion who came to New Japan was not Bob Backlund. Actually, it was a superstar Billy Graham. Yeah, it was 1978, February of 1978 it was at the Nippon Budokan Big Show for New Japan, the double main event. It was Antonio Inoki against Umanosuke Ueda, the 5-inch nail death match thing, if you remember. There was like a plywood with this 5-inch nail sticking out, and all around the ringside area that if you fell from the ring, you die, kind of thing. Like a decades later, yes, people like Mr. Danger, Mr. Mitsuhiro Matsunaga against Leatherface, they actually went down to the this 5-inch nail mat, and there was a deathmatch thing. But the very first, it's almost like a useless trivia, but the 5-inch nail, the dangerous looking deathmatch were introduced by Umanosuke Ueda. It was Inoki against him at the Budokan. And double feature was superstar Billy Graham as a champion, and challenger was Sakaguchi. And it was more like introducing WWF champion into New Japan ring. And it was amazing because 3 years prior to that, 1975, Bruno Sammartino was brought in by Giant Baba, and Giant Baba and Bruno Sammartino had a very first WWF title match in Japan, and that was, of course, double count out. But the affiliate, the business partnership was announced, and like myself as a kid fan was excited, because Giant Baba always had this strong connection with NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, and AWA. People like Vern Gagne, Nick Bockwinkel, all these, AWA star would come in. Inoki didn't have, strong affiliate with American major companies. So it was really exciting that the one channel, like I said, Channel 10 TV Asahi, Inoki's New Japan, Channel 4 NTV, Nippon TV, All Japan Pro Wrestling, Giant Baba's company. It's like you have two network doing two different wrestling, major company, and broadcasted on prime time every week. So we had two different wrestling, and Bob always had, all kinds American superstar you really read on the magazines, and Inoki didn't. But this time, yes, the partnership became strong, and all the WWF superstars started coming in. That was an exciting time. And for the record, in Japan, it was announced that the name of the company was changed from WWF to just WWF. It was March of 1979. As a record, yeah.
What I found pretty, I guess you could say now it's unprecedented, but the time you mentioned Bruno Sammartino having a match with Giant Baba, despite the deal that you talked about earlier that Inoki had with
Right.
WWF.
What was interesting is, though, that the spring of 1974, Vince McMahon Sr. came to Japan and shook hands with Antonio Inoki in the ring, and made made an announcement that they're becoming a partner. And that very same month, Giant Baba himself got on the plane and went to New York and worked Madison Square Garden show just to find out what the deal was.
Hmm.
Yeah, then that 1974 spring, Giant Baba made very, very rare appearance, first time in 10 years. 1974, Baba had a single match against Gorilla Monsoon, Madison Square Garden. It was very political because Giant Baba had to find out, because McMahon family and Baba were friends then. So, but the deal was made that New York superstar, started coming in, and but still, Baba himself had to fly himself over to New York, Madison Square Garden, to find out what the deal was.
Hmm.
But deal was already made, I think. The thing is, though, that the TV Asahi in New Japan paid certain amount of money to become partner with WWF at the time, whereas Giant Baba with all the American NWA promoter affiliates, they never really paid money with to book talent. It was more of a more Giant Baba did the real old fashioned, handshake deal that promised, Baba promised certain amount of money to book American talent and come to Japan and make money, and the amount he promised was paid always. Then American wrestler will go home very happily ever after, something like that. But it was against Baba's idea to pay American company an annual amount to be the partner. It was like, but the business is business. I guess that basically Inoki came in and got the deal with Vince McMahon Sr. and became partners. He needed that at the time. Are you following me? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So Baba wanted an equal business relationship with everyone else, whereas Inoki was just going a different route.
Exclusively, yeah.
Hmm.
Because WWE, Vince McMahon Sr.'s WWF was a place where they rotate all the superstars, 90-day turnaround. If you remember, one challenger come in to challenge your WWF champion, and you challenge at Madison Square Garden, and probably first challenge, the first title match, they go over. The challenger will go over on count out or something. Then second match, that no contest, and third match, the climax. So usually 3 months deal was at the Madison Square Garden. That's your premier card. Then you go on the road, like road show, to go to Boston or Philadelphia or Washington D.C. or almost like exact same card. Like I'm talking about Billy Graham against Mil Mascaras, or Billy Graham against Dusty Rhodes, Billy Graham against Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund wins the title, and as Billy Graham challenged him again, and they go on the road and have like 50 other times. It was like a road show. But Madison Square Garden in WWFD was that new challenger coming every 90 days or so. So you have all the new challenger. You remember as a kid, like every 90 days period that the new challenger come in and challenge Bob Backlund. And after that program, they would all fly to Japan and work New Japan.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the pattern. That was the cycle.
Yeah, so that it worked so perfectly, and that the deal was made. And it was 1978. Actually, was that a January of 1978? Bob Backlund finally beat superstar Billy Graham to become a champion, and it was a time young Tatsumi Fujinami became introduced a new division, junior heavyweight title. It wasn't so much in America, but it was a really big deal in Japan that young Fujinami, 24 years at the time, he came back to Japan as a superstar. He became, WWF junior heavyweight champion, world champion, and made debut, new debut in Japan, and became number 2 right underneath Antonio Inoki. It was a big deal. And it was like winning a championship at Madison Square Garden with, with full Nelson, Dragon Suplex. And it was like the Star was born type of thing.
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that it just got easier to be an NFL fan, even if you live far away. Like maybe you like the Bears, but you're hibernating in Panthers territory. But with NFL Sunday Ticket, your out-of-market team is never more than a short distance away, specifically the distance from you to your remote control. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
What's up? It's Kaylee Cuoco. When it comes to travel, we all have a happy place. I just went to my happy place. I just went to Maui, and it was truly amazing. Priceline has always been about getting you to your happy place for a happy price with deals you really can't find anywhere else. Like up to 60% off select hotels in Costa Rica or 5-star hotels for 2-star prices in Cabo.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
And only 4 months after Bob Backlund beat Billy Graham to become the new WWF champion, Bob Backlund came to Japan in this June of 1978 and had WWF title and NWF Inoki's championship and NWF title double title match was held at the Budokan. It was a first meeting. There were 3 title matches that year. 1978. Oh, I remember this clearly because the first title match I went there live,
Whoa.
And yeah, because it was NWF and WWF double title match, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went, I went over there with more innocent, wrestling fan friend, and my friends were hoping that the Inoki will get 2 titles, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was more of a magazine reading oriented fan, by then that I knew title wasn't going to change hands.
How old were you by this time?
I
Were
was
you in
10th
college? 10th? Oh, you're high school?
10th grade. Yeah, 10th grade.
So you knew the deal.
Yeah, but 10th grade, 16-year-old, but I've been reading. Well, I read all the wrestling magazines, by then, and, back to back and twice. And, pretty much I was the doctor, professional pro wrestler in school, But you always had more innocent wrestling fan friends, right? Because they believed that the title would change hands in Japan. And, well, when you hear NWF and WWF double title match, you had to sense that no, title wasn't going to change hands. Sure enough, it was first meeting of Antonio Inoki against new champion Bob Backlund. And Bob Backlund was a very ideal wrestler for Japanese market because he is clean cut athlete and really wrestles. And it's more like a Korogachi, Billy Robinson type image. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was going to ask, what was the fan reaction or reception to Backlund compared to the other foreigners at the time?
Oh, not like Tiger Jeet Singh, like a complete heel. It was like Bob Backlund, like he carried himself as champion and come in all clean cut and short trunks, wrestling boot, no frills. He just wrestles, right?
Sportsman.
So he was like perfect for Japanese market at the time. See, Inoki against 1969. And Dory Funk, Jack Briscoe, or just something like 1975 Antonio Inoki against Billy Robinson. It was like a legendary. People want to see like a really good, clean wrestling match. And the new champion, new star, who just became WWF champion in America, and he was 28, 29 years old at the time. Bob Backlund was a perfect champion to have a important title match against Antonio Inoki at his prime. And the first meeting was 2 out of 3 full match, right? Inoki technically beat Bob Backlund. It was like a 2 out of 3 full match, and the first fall came in like in 40-minute mark, and Inoki had a count out first fall, and second fall they went all the way to 60-minute time limit. It wasn't a draw, but 2 out of 3 fall match. Inoki won the first fall, but the time expired, so technically 1-0, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the title wouldn't change hands. Therefore, Inoki defended his NWF title, but could not win WWF title. Well done. Does that make sense?
Classic booking in that time. You never really.
Yeah, I think so. It was like almost very creative. Inoki beat new champion Bob Backlund, but couldn't win the title. Yeah, oh well. But well-paced 60-minute, so win-win situation that the Bob Backlund worthy champion that Inoki couldn't beat him, but the title wasn't. Both title was at stake, but they shook hand and left. And second match took place only 1 or 2 months later. It was in July that only this time WWF title at stake, and another 2 out of 3 full match. they did 60-minute Broadway again. This time, one fall each. So they progressed a little bit. Inoki took first fall with Octopus, and Bob Backlund took second fall with his famous atomic drop. Then went into 60-minute time draw. So second match in July of 78, another draw, but Inoki couldn't win the title. And there was a third meeting the same year, 1978, December. This time was Inoki beating only WWF title at stake, and Inoki again beat Bob Backlund with count out finish, not the pinfall or submission in the ring, but the Inoki, they had a double knockdown, over the top thing, but came back to ring just to beat the 20 count of 20 in Japan, right? And Inoki beat Bob Backlund with count out thing, but still title don't change hand via count out. Therefore, Inoki beat him, but Bob Backlund held the title again. So those were the 1978 3-match program: June, July, and December. But you couldn't do that forever, right?
Right.
Yeah. So 1 year later, fourth meeting, November of 1979. It had to be sure thing that this time, Inoki was, in the interview saying that if he couldn't win the title this time, he's not going to challenge Backlund again. So it was like a sure thing that the people felt that Inoki's winning WWF title for sure this time, right? And sure enough, November 30th in Tokushima, that Inoki beat Bob Backlund to become very first Japanese wrestler to be WWF champion. For the record, November 30th of 1979, Inoki beat him to become WWF champion. And he wore the purple Virgin leather of Bob Backlund model belt. And first title, this is where it gets tricky and very interesting. And the booking was so creative that you have to follow me. And if you have any questions, you ask me, okay?
Sure, yeah.
It's like so much details that they did it so well that it's just like, I'm not going to forget this one because it's so creative. November 30th, in 1979, Tokushima, Inoki beat Bob Backlund to become the very first Japanese wrestler to win the New York version of this WWF title, right? And 1 week later, December 6th, at the old Sumo Palace at the Kuramae, Inoki does have this first title defense, okay? It was, to make a long story short, it was no contest, decision that the Tiger Jitsin came in and destroyed the title match, right? And Tiger Jitsin start beating up Inoki, and in the middle of chaos, somehow, that Bob Backlund pins damaged Inoki 1, 2, 3, right? But the minutes later, the decision was reversed. Referee said there was no contest. Therefore, Inoki, that holds his WWF title, whereas Bob Backlund say, no, I beat Inoki clean, so I get the title back. Controversial finish. Are you following me?
It was disputed. It wasn't a clean finish. There was still
right.
up in the air who really won.
Involvement, and Inoki got beaten up, and somehow Bob Backlund, in the middle of it, Bob Backlund pins Antonio Inoki and get the belt for a few seconds, but the referee reversed the decision as no contest, right? And Inoki keep the title because of this no contest decision, and champion will keep the title kind of thing. But Inoki wasn't, storyline though, okay? Inoki wasn't happy with this no contest decision, therefore he vacates the title. So it's like he never lost the title. He vacates WWF title. I don't want to hold the championship like this. Great storyline, right? And only 11 days later, this is where it gets really, really tricky. In Japan, WWF title was vacant because Inoki, without losing it in the ring, Inoki returned the title to WWF. I don't want to hold the championship like this, right? And it was announced in Japan that Inoki Bob Backlund match, title up for grab, will be held at the Madison Square Garden December 17th. 11 days later, after this Kuramae Sumo Palace show. So New Japan crew and TV Asahi crew get on the plane, and then it was all planned that they were gonna, do the big taping at the Madison Square Garden. Not just in Inoki, but Fujinami will be defending his title, WWF Junior Heavyweight title against Johnny Rivera at Madison Square Garden. Also, Seiji Sakaguchi and Riki Choshu as a NWA North American Tag Team title will be defended against Bad News Allen and the guy Jojo Andrews, if you remember well. But it was at the building. It was announced Japanese Tag Team Championship. No, it was North American Tag Team Champion in Japan. But those are the little details that the play-by-play announcer at the time was Vince McMahon, of all people. Okay, and he pronounced Riki Choshu as Riki Koshu, right? Anyhow, Seiji Sakaguchi and Riki Choshu, North American Tag Team Champions at the time, will bring the belt to America in defending their title against Bad News Allen and Jojo Andrews, two African guys. And that was one title match. And like I said, Fujinami against Johnny Rivera, the WWF Junior Heavyweight title. And in Japan, Inoki and Bob Backlund was going to have the decision-making last match, that title up for grab for WWF Championship. And when all the Japanese press, when all the Japanese press got there, Vince McMahon Sr. had a short little press conference just for Japanese press. This gets really, really creative. Mr. Inoki will be defending his WWF Martial Arts Heavyweight title against Great Hassan. That is Iron Sheik's another name, okay? Therefore, there will not be Inoki Backlund title match tonight. Mr. Inoki will be defending his WWF Martial Arts title against Great Hassan. That's it. So, okay. Then instead, Bob Backlund will be having a single match against Bobby Duncan. So Japanese press and photographers in the building at Madison Square Garden was led to believe that, right, title is still up for grab. Title is vacant, and title is still up for grab. And the title match that night will be Bob Backlund against Cowboy Bob Duncan instead of Inoki against Backlund. Okay, title is still up for grab. And at the building, Bob Backlund and Bobby Duncan main event was announced by Howard Finkel. Texas Deathmatch. Nothing was announced about this, title up for grab, because people in New York City in 1979 did not know the title, changed hand in Japan. Well, news traveled a lot slower then, right?
You would never find out. I mean, it was just two different worlds.
Or maybe fanzine, or more people with a little information, or the wrestling, like a tight wrestling fan with pen pals, writing each other things. I mean, that was like way decades before the internet. Okay. Yeah, but anyhow, that the Bob Backlund and Bobby Duncan match happened at the building. It was announced by Howard Finkel, Texas Deathmatch, right? And sure enough, Bob Backlund came in without the championship belt because it was Texas Deathmatch, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was announced in Japan. The title was still vacant, and this is a title up for grab, Bob Backlund against Bobby Duncan. And Texas Deathmatch took place, and Bob Backlund beat Bobby Duncan, and winner. And in Japan, Bob Backlund regained the title. And Antonio Inoki against Great Hassan Iron Sheik took place. Inoki defended his WWF Martial Arts title, and was the end of the story. And so Inoki and crew, TV Asahi crew, Sakaguchi, Riki Choshu, Fujinami all went to Madison Square Garden. They taped their match, and it was televised in Japan the following week. And Bob Backlund, Bobby Duncan match. Yeah, Bob Backlund became WWF champion again. And Antonio Inoki defended his WWF Martial Arts title against Great Hassan Iron Sheik. Yeah, he's still WWF Martial Arts champion, and so on. Fujinami defended his WWF Junior Heavyweight title, and Sakaguchi and Riki Choshu successfully defended their North American Tag Team Championship. That was like 90-minute, primetime special. And this whole issue of Inoki not happy with the decision and relinquished the title, and the title became vacant, and the title up for grabs thing was all forgotten.
That is a lot
Sure,
of
yeah.
information.
Does that make sense? Yeah, but it
I
was
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So I think the one thing I want to just correct me if I'm interpreting it wrong, but so WWF told the Japanese press one thing about the Texas Death Match, that it was for
No,
the
it was announced in America.
okay, it was announced in America
Yeah,
that it was
Texas. Because at the Madison Square Garden, this title being vacant, and this match is up for championship up for grab thing was never announced in America. It was simply a Texas Death Match main event at the Madison Square Garden. Bob Backlund against Bobby Duncombe. For Japanese press, it was still announced the title up for grab, but it was not Inoki Bob Backlund match. Instead, it was Bob Backlund against Bobby Duncombe match.
for the title that Inoki had
No.
vacated.
For the Inoki title change never happened in America. Therefore, the title being vacant thing never have occurred in America.
Right.
It was just explained to Japanese fans, therefore Japanese audience. Are you following me?
Very interesting. It would never happen again because of how information
travels now, right? Because
in split second. There's no way.
November 30th in Tokushima on television match, Inoki clearly beat Bob Backlund to become very first Japanese WWF champion. And 6 days later at the Kuramae Old Sumo Palace, Inoki's very first title defense, champion Inoki against challenger former champion Bob Backlund, that happened. And they had this controversy, no contest finish that Tiger Jeet Singh ran in and start beating up on Inoki, and then somehow Bob Backlund pins Inoki, and he holds the belt for a few seconds. Referee reversed the decision, and then it's a no contest. Therefore, Inoki defends his title, and Inoki not happy about this ending, and I don't want to be champion like this. He relinquished the title, therefore the title become vacant. That's information and storyline in Japan. And in Japan, it was announced the following 11 days later at the Madison Square Garden, like a global scale title match story, that the title up for grab again, Bob Backlund against Inoki, will be happening at the Madison Square Garden. We all believed it. Then at the December 17th, 11 days later at the Madison Square Garden, when all the photographers in here announced that Mr. Inoki will be defending his martial arts title against Great Hassan Iron Sheik tonight. Therefore, there will be no Inoki against Bob Backlund match tonight here at the building. And sure enough, Bob Backlund, Bobby Duncombe match was Texas Death Match because it was the to be continued thing from the previous month. Bobby Duncombe was challenging Bob Backlund, and just, there was some controversy, double no contest, double juice kind of match. And to make the conclusion of Bob Backlund, Bobby Duncombe match, it was Texas Death Match. That was like that in New York. Okay. And title never changed hand in America, and people did not know about it. And no title was ever vacant, nothing. It was Texas Death Match main event announced by Howard Finkel. Okay. So for New York people's eyes, Bob Backlund never lost a title and was a champion still then. And for Japanese audience, yeah, the title was up for grab. And instead of having Inoki Bob Backlund, the final match, it was announced at the building. Bob Backlund will be Bobby Duncombe, will be doing the match, title up for grab. That was storyline for Japanese press. Now you're following me.
It's pretty. I mean, I just can't imagine something like that happening today, just because of how the environment, what it's turned into.
God, no, not today's. It's 1979. You're talking about 40 years ago.
I mean, most people, more people don't know Inoki rather than know Inoki over here, ultimately. So it's just amazing how you can sort of
that was like
wash the history.
Was the most creative, title lineage story, though, because Inoki did not exactly lose championship, but was able to let go of the title. without losing face.
And the fans bought it.
I guess so. And also, I think who is guilty, I think Japanese wrestling press and sports paper and wrestling magazines are just as guilty. Does that make sense?
Did they get a little creative with what was going on? Was there
1979, Gong magazine and the baseball magazine, pro wrestling magazine are still monthly.
Okay.
Not Shu Pro, weekly pro wrestling or baseball magazine, and weekly the Gong magazine wouldn't become weekly until summer of 1983.
Mm-hmm.
All these big, huge, detailed storyline happened within the month. So next month issue, like if it was a monthly magazine, it was already done by the time magazine come out.
It was already old,
I guess. And January comes in the new season. Yeah. But for the record, Inoki Bob Backlund title match happened three more times. April of 1980 in Miami, Florida, NWA territory, but the Bob Backlund still, frequent travel that the NWA Florida territory, but Bob Backlund, occasionally came in and defended his WWF title. In April of 1980, there was Inoki against Bob Backlund title match in Miami, Florida. And back summer, August of 1980 in Shinagawa, Tokyo, there was another Inoki against Bob Backlund title match. Then that 81, I believe it was May of 1981 at the Mexico El Trail, there was Inoki against Bob Backlund match in Mexico. There was just almost like a guest appearance. So 3 more Inoki Bob Backlund title match happened, but title never changed hand after that. And Bob Backlund will be holding WWF title until Iron Sheik Hulk Hogan kind of program, right? All the way to end of 83. And Inoki never challenged Bob Backlund after that in New Japan ring. See, Bob Backlund still had a lot of tours with New Japan in the meantime, all the way to 84. And it was always Bob Backlund against Dusty Rhodes, Bob Backlund against young Hulk Hogan, Bob Backlund against heel Stan Hansen, Bob Backlund against Fujinami as a heavyweight. So Bob Backlund still came back to Japan and defended his WWF title, but the program with Inoki was pretty much dropped after that.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
So this, you could say, is definitely one of Bob Backlund's career highlights. This was, he's one of those. He's interpreted a certain way over here.
Probably because of Hulk Hogan and national WWF Vince McMahon's national expansion, that Bob Backlund's legacy has been kind of overlooked. See, he was the main guy at the Madison Square Garden for the 6-year period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
just about, yeah. Right before Hogan
was Backlund your champion. Your childhood champion.
No, Hogan was. That was my dad. My dad
already.
was.
Okay, your dad. Okay.
When he was in high school, he would tell me about.
See, New York WWF in the East Coast, always had babyface champion. Twice long reign with Bruno Sammartino, of course. Then there was Pedro Morales era, and Billy Graham was the only heel champion who was a champion for any length of time. But they always had transitional heel champion like Ivan Koloff or Stan Stasiak or somebody like that to switch to another babyface champion. And Bob Backlund beating Billy Graham for the first time was a big deal. And he held the champion nearly 6-7 years. And his legacy has been so overlooked. And Bob Backlund was, I think, more popular in Japan because of his style. Like he worked, he wrestled like Karl Gotch. He wrestled like Billy Robinson. And the Japanese fan really likes the wrestler. Does that make sense?
That and the market that was WWF at the time, they were so programmed to. What it was monsters versus big baby faces in the main event. It was always a bit over the top in the heavyweight championship division.
Yeah, and then this is like a literally babyface. Bob Backlund will beat all these monster heels.
Right, and the style that Bob Backlund wrestled was something that you'd probably see out west or somewhere down south in the Crockett territories in Minnesota, but that style of more wrestling's wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of fit in certain areas of the territories at the time, but it just, for some reason, a lot of fans, it didn't connect with the New York audience.
Bruno Sammartino was like a Italian hero. Pedro
Hmm.
Morales was a Puerto Rican hero, and Bob Backlund era, he was all American boy, huh?
My dad said a
But-
lot of people called him Howdy Doody. Remember
Howdy Doody Bob Backlund? Yeah, because he's so white, Yeah, like a Midwestern boy. Yeah, so
Yeah.
white was like a real cute butt, right? Yeah, and came from like an amateur background, and he was a perfect fit, and he was favorite WWF champion in 70s and early 80s Japanese fans. They still talk highly about Bob Backlund's legacy. If you remember, Bob Backlund was invited back to UWF,
That's
because he was
right.
like a believable wrestler,
He showed
But,
up in Tenru's promotion too.
That too, yeah. And also, just imagine both guys at their prime time, Bob Backlund against Fujinami in their prime wrestling match. Good matches.
Fujinami was quite different before
Yeah.
1987,
And Bob
1988.
Backlund at babyface. Yeah, and in early 80s in New Japan Ring, the Bob Backlund babyface against heel version of Dusty Rhodes. Bob Backlund against heel Stan Hansen. Bob Backlund against younger heel version of Hulk Hogan. And it's a useless trivia, but the December 17th, 1979, Inoki appearance, Sakaguchi, Rikichoshu, Fujinami, and that was the night Hulk Hogan, heel Hulk Hogan made his debut against Ted DiBiase, beating not the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, but the young babyface Ted DiBiase. And young heel Hulk Hogan was manager Freddie Blassie, of course, that made his debut as Hulk Hogan. The name was given by Vince McMahon Sr., Hulk Hogan, Incredible Hulk Hogan, big heel, like giant version of Billy Graham that made his debut that night. Very interesting night, huh?
At that time, he even talked like Billy Graham. The way he talked, the way he wrestled in the ring, the cape, sunglasses.
Sure.
He was very reminiscent of Billy Graham.
Yeah, like a larger version of Billy Graham almost.
Updated version.
Yeah. And after that, it was recently, people were making a lot of comments about Hulk Hogan's Rocky III appearance a couple years later, that it happened during AWA. No, that the actual movie filming took place during this era, that 1981, 82-ish. 82, by 82, he was already in AWA. So that Rocky had to be filmed sometimes during 1981 period, I think. Yeah. Because Hulk Hogan, remember the conversation with Andre the Giant that don't forget being a professional wrestler and just like don't lose it. See, Andre and Hogan was always close, like as a friends, and Vince McMahon Sr. did not like the idea that his wrestler going to movies, but Andre said, go ahead, and this will be a big break for you. Yeah. So that portion was kind of overlooked. But anyhow, that Hulk Hogan was already in the background, and it was really interesting that Hulk Hogan makes his debut with New Japan, first as a young tag team partner of Stan Hansen, who was already a big, huge superstar with New Japan. In 1980, you have to, think that this early 1980 version of Antonio Inoki, just invincible. I mean, nobody beats Antonio Inoki in Japan, right? But Stan Hansen beats Inoki for this NWF title, and they exchanged, the plate catch with this title. That made Stan Hansen really household name in Japan, beating primetime Antonio Inoki to become NWF champion. So he was almost replacing Andre the Giant as a top gaijin American talent in New Japan Ring.
I think around this time too, a lot of the fellows we're mentioning right now, Hogan, Andre, Backlund, Inoki. I think there was a match. It's probably floating around on YouTube, but it's with all these four were pretty regularly wrestling each other at around the time too for New Japan.
And some of these historical matches are you found in New Japan World Archives. Today's New Japan World, the network service thing. You search Inoki's 70 matches in the early 80s match. You'll have Inoki against Backlund and Andre match, Bob Backlund matches all in there. Not every single one of them, but the important matches are in there.
Yeah, a
But
lot of the ones that we're talking about.
Yeah. Today's fans don't go into this New Japan World Archive and find Inoki matches. It's all for like middle-aged male wrestling fans. Today's fans don't go back and watch Inoki matches because this is like he's like a grandpa of everybody, right?
Yeah, but going back and watching his matches, he's one of those wrestlers that.
Oh, you learn so much.
And it's not dated. It's not as dated as you'd think. I mean, you can go back and watch Backlund and Inoki, and they're not that.
Yeah,
they're not that outdated.
The content of matches and how they build is the long match, title match kind of thing. The formula is still there. That works today. Yeah.
They didn't do anything too outrageous where it would look silly in the future. You know what I mean?
And also they were doing, to make people mad, they were doing this Tiger Jeet thing as your wild card, that he was not even involved in the title match, but he does the run-in to destroy the title match, to make people mad, and put heat on Tiger Jeet Singh. Oh, God, he destroyed a title match, put big heat on Tiger Jeet Singh instead of putting heat on Inoki or Backlund. The formula is clearly there. And also have to point out the deal that Giant Baba, on the other hand, All Japan, Giant Baba had a 3 NWA World Heavyweight Champion reign, okay? And when Inoki beat Bob Backlund for the first time to become the very first Japanese wrestler to hold WWF title, I said it was November of 1979.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right? Exactly 1 month before that, October 31st of 1979, Baba beats Harley Race in Nagoya to become NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So they had to do this. Oh, I'm pretty sure that just as soon as Baba found out that the Inoki is going over on Bob Backlund to win the title in Japan, Baba had to bring Harley Race over to Japan 1 month before that, just so he becomes NWA World Champion. And that's televised. I mean, it's like rivalry between two network stations, two different companies, All Japan and New Japan and Baba and Inoki. This rivalry is so severe so serious that Baba had to beat Harley Race in Japan, televised match to become NWA World Champion before, make sure 1 month before Inoki beats Backlund to become WWF Champion. Isn't that interesting?
So it was a strategic move as well as, creative move as well.
Yeah, but the difference between Baba and Inoki is that, though. Okay, first time Baba beat Jack Briscoe to become very first Japanese wrestler to become NWA World Champion. He defends the title once, but at the end of the tour, no TV, televised match. Jack Briscoe beats Baba to get the title back, and he goes home. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This time, after Baba beat Harley Race for the second time, 1 month before Inoki Backlund thing, that the Baba becomes NWA World Champion for the second time. But only 7 days later at the Amagasaki, not a big city, right? But the Amagasaki, November 7th, Race beats Baba to get the title back, then goes home. They did that following year, 1980, September of 1980 at the Saga. Giant Baba beats Harley Race again for the third time. He becomes NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Sure enough, that 5 days later, the Otsu of all places, that Race beats Baba again, and he, basically returning the title to Harley Race, and Race go home happy, So Baba always returned the title in that ring. Baba beats the champion to become NWA champion, but the Harley Race or Jack Briscoe always beat Baba again at the end of the tour, and the handshake was good. That Baba basically returned his title, and that the Harley Race, regained the title again. and he goes back to America like nothing happened. But NWA record, it shows that an official record that Giant Baba won NWA World Heavyweight Championship 3 times. It was in record. Whereas Inoki's Inoki's reign as WWF champion was never acknowledged in America. Therefore, it's not in record.
Right.
It's in Japanese record or Bill After magazine record. Yes, Inoki became WWF champion in Japan once, and the title was vacant. All these things is record, but WWF, to this day, WWE record does not have Inoki as champion listed. Is that interesting? So there was Inoki way of handling business, and there was Baba way of handling business. And well-read, reading-oriented Japanese wrestling fans learn about the world. It's interesting enough that it's like almost like a philosophy. Baba way of handling things and Inoki way of handling things. They're two different philosophy almost. So therefore you learn about something about the adult world or business world. Yeah. That's like Inoki, if you like the way Inoki handles his things or the way Baba handles his things. And well, in a way, Baba losing the first title defense and returning title would kind of expose the business, that the well-read, reading-oriented wrestling fans will, always figure out, right, yeah, yes, Baba won the title from Harley Race, but he'll be returning a title at the end of the tour. Sure enough, that's how it happens, right? Whereas, Inoki won the WWF title from Backlund and became, the only and first WWF champion in history. Great. Inoki didn't even lose the title. He relinquished the title, and then the title became vacant in very creative storyline and 2 title matches and one in Japan in the Madison Square Garden thing, all taped, and it's like a big, huge drama kind of thing almost, and in larger scale too. So you just have to figure out, on your own that you like, Inoki way of doing a title match, or Baba is the right one, like the honest businessman, like a losing title at the end of the tour, like you should, and that's wrestling business. It's like it's up to you, who is the right way to do the business. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. I think, okay, I don't know if it comes off as this way to you, but to me, in these situations, Inoki does feel like the underdog in the situation for most of the 70s into the 80s.
Yeah, because Inoki couldn't have NWA World Title championship match in New Japan Ring, and for 70s into 80s, NWA National Wrestling Alliance until Vince McMahon's national expansion, NWA was the closest thing to undisputed world championship.
So
Agreed?
yeah,
In the wrestling world. Yeah.
So who, when someone at All Japan made a choice to do the Harley Race program, was that Giant Baba who was pitching those strategies, or was that coming down from the television station, or who was really spearheading it? Because it seems like there's some kind of intent behind it, but it would explain the intent if we could know who was who made that decision.
I believe it's both Giant Baba and NTV Channel 4, because TV Asahi and Antonio Inoki, that just as soon as they find out that Inoki will be beating Backlund for the WWF title in Japan, Channel 4, NTV, and Giant Baba All Japan will bring in Harley Race to beat him. That's it's a good business, right? 1 month, just exactly 1 month before this, Inoki Backlund title change taking place, Baba will bring in Harley Race just to beat him. But at the end of the tour, Race will beat him again, non-televised match to return the title, But all the reading-oriented wrestling fan in Japan will know all about it, though. That's how wrestling business works. I mean, kind of lose your fantasy mode, right? A little bit. Yeah. So it's like the long, if you watch, let's put it that way, if you watch wrestling long enough, that I think a lot of the wrestling fan will think Baba is better promoter than Superstar Inoki. But vast majority or the mainstream fan don't look at it that way. That Inoki beating Bob Backlund, New York champion, and that relinquishing title not because he wasn't happy with how the title match went, and he had so much pride that he doesn't want to hold the title championship that way, and he relinquished the title. Great pride. The storyline worked, yeah, for general public. So this is always up to us that who is better promoter or better producer or more creative producer or who comes off more honest businessman. This is like two different issues already.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the partnership between New Japan and WWF Vince McMahon Senior era was so strong that there was you have All Japan has champion Carnival Spring Tournament, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who is the best man to do this, round robin tournament? There was a series, the tour called Madison Square Garden Series for 5-year period, 1978, 79, 80, 81, 82. Yeah, 5-year period between 78 to 82. Madison Square Garden Series for New Japan. Every spring, they brought in people from WWE, like the guest appearance of Bob Backlund, of course. You have Andre the Giant, you have Stan Hansen. They rotated like people like you have Tony Atlas, the Don Morocco, the Rene Goulet, not so big, but all these big stars from WWF come in and compete in championship tournament. And of course, Inoki usually wins, but the one year Andre the Giant, won the championship. The final was, instead of Inoki, it was Andre the Giant against Killer Khan in 1 year. And there was, when the end of November and December comes, in Japan, you have tag team tournament season, right? Of course, All Japan's real world tag team tournament is such a big deal. And New Japan had this Madison Square Garden Tag Team League. It's a tag team version of Madison Square Garden series that they held this big tour between 1980 to 84. So that's another 5-year period. 80, 81, 82, 83, 84. Yeah, 5-year period. First year, the tag team of Inoki and Bob Backlund won the championship. That's ultimate babyface, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for the time. Yeah. The two top champions.
Oh yeah, and that's 80 and 81. Andre the Giant and Rene Goulet tag team won the tag team tournament, and 82 and 83, 2 consecutive years. Antonio Inoki and babyface Hulk Hogan won the tag team championship. I mean, not the championship, but the tag team tournament. 82 and 83, 2-year period. Inoki and Hulk Hogan won the tournament, and I think 84. Inoki Fujinami tag team probably won. It wasn't so important anymore because now we have this big, huge project of IWGP starts as of 1980.
1980.
Yeah, that the idea, that the first IWGP actual tournament won't take place until 1983. But the project started like, you plant the idea, you plant the seed into people's head. International Wrestling Grand Prix will start. And this is to determine that the undisputed, who is the best wrestler in the world today, that it will be, that the tournament will be held. All the existing championship will be relinquished. Inoki will vacate his NWF title. Yeah. And Sakaguchi will be relinquishing, vacating his North American heavyweight title. Tiger Jitsin will be vacating his All Asian championship. That you give up all the titles. Stan Hansen will be giving up his 10-gallon hat because he's a cowboy, right? 1981, Abdullah the Butcher quits. Well, of course, he got signed away. But the huge superstar Abdullah the Butcher quits All Japan and come into New Japan ring and relinquish his Caribbean heavyweight title. Is there such championship? Anyhow, that he brought in some, good-looking championship belt, and he relinquished the title because he wanted to be part of IWGP. And actually, Inoki, that really vacate his NWF title. That was a marquee championship, right? For NWF title was marquee title, marquee championship belt for what 7-year period. Inoki defended his title, and defended his title championship against all the top name from all over the world and whatnot. He relinquished the title, therefore, this IWGP project will start. This will be the biggest thing in wrestling. 1980s fan all bought it. It would be better than NWF. It would be better than WWF. It would be better than NWA. That was the idea.
It was fresh. It was a new idea.
Yeah. And relinquishing an existing title. Oh, it's like, wow.
It's a real deal.
Yeah, real deal. Yeah. So New Japan held all these tours and shows without any championship for 3-year period. There was, a single match program, Inoki against Stan Hansen again, something like Inoki against, say, Masked Superstar. They did the main event without title, without championship. Oh, they did interesting, because now that I brought up that the Masked Superstar, another wrestler whose legacy has been overlooked. He was big superstar in Japan in that time, late 70s into early 80s, Masked Superstar. Maybe he's more famous as Demolition in America, right?
Probably. As
Probably.
Acts of Demolition.
Acts, yeah, Demolition. But the Masked Superstar was a top superstar in Japan. When they didn't have championship belt to defend, there was like a single match, Inoki against Masked Superstar. Masked Superstar's mask was at stake. Yeah. So Inoki beat Masked Superstar in the middle of the ring and unmasked him. That was dramatic. Yeah. Then he came back as a Billy Crusher without mask, who won tour and didn't go over that well. So he went back to Masked Superstar shortly after that. But so that thing happens. And very first inaugural IWGP tournament happened finally in 1983. Like 40 shows, 40 days in a row, all over Japan, all big shows. Inoki, Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, the Big John Studd, the Otto Vance from Europe, that Enrique Vera from Mexico, that Akira Maeda coming back from Europe as a Europe heavyweight champion. So he's in the main event, cluster. Dick Murdoch, probably Adrian Adonis, the Russia Kimura, all these top talent had this round robin tournament. The final was, instead of having Andre the Giant, that was Antonio Inoki against soon to be larger than life superstar Hulk Hogan. That was the time. See, Stan Hansen already left for All Japan at the end of 1981. He was full-time in All Japan in 1982. That's when Hulk Hogan signed exclusive deal with All Japan and turned baby face. That was very smart, It was smart on New Japan's part, but the Hulk Hogan studied Inoki, Bob Backlund, and Stan Hansen under the Giant in Japan. You know what I'm saying?
If you go back, and now that we can watch it so easily, you can go back and you can see where he got the moves, where he got his rhythm. A lot of
you should go back and see babyface Hulk Hogan against Abdullah the Butcher in New Japan, and doing hulking up, right?
The first time
he come back with like a 3-punch. Of course, Inoki's punch was comeback. It was exactly like Inoki. Yeah. And it was Inoki was the Inoki and Hulk Hogan, 28-year-old Hulk Hogan became tag team, like a real big, huge babyface. Hulk Hogan wearing kimono and smart enough. He had this black trunks and silver boots, but he had Ichiban kanji writing on his trunks. Like now he's local babyface, right?
Long blonde hair, big sunglasses.
Yep. And he worked like when American wrestling fan hear Hulk Hogan's name, it's like always, you associate with yellow trunks and yellow boots and big boots and leg drop 1 to 3, right? It's not like that. When he was working New Japan pretty much full time, he wrestled like Japanese style. Really did. So these people have to go back and watch, New Japan archive to find out that Hulk Hogan really did wrestle. Really. He was pretty good. He was really good, actually. So I have to defend him. Yeah.
Yeah, he had, I mean, if you go back and watch the matches that he was in around this time, they're not going to put somebody who can't wrestle in the ring with Inoki and Andre the Giant and Stan Hansen and Bob Backlund.
Yeah.
I'm not
Rick
saying
Murdoch,
he's
for
like,
that matter.
I'm not saying he's Billy Robinson or Carl Gott, but I'm saying
No,
he was
no.
absolutely more than what can I say? Above average
American, yeah.
for
Way
his height and size and for the
above. And
time.
also, Hulk Hogan initially was introduced to Japanese ring back in 1980 as a protege of Hiro Matsuda. This guy was trained by Japanese wrestler Hiro Matsuda, right? Hiro Matsuda is a coach of Hogan, Paul Orndorff, Ron Simmons, Lex Luger. He only trained big guys, talented big guys. And yeah, Hulk Hogan was always in kind of a right place at the right time kind of guy, of course. But Hulk Hogan was so smart that just as soon as Stan Hansen left for All Japan, he took that spot right away and signed a deal with New Japan, like your contract with New Japan, and turned babyface. And there on, it's just real Hulk Hogan legacy starts with New Japan, not with WWF. That's what I'm talking about, I think.
Hulkamania started in Tokyo, not New York.
Right. And at the same time, he was, dividing his time with AWA Minneapolis and in Tokyo. In Minneapolis, he already had started a program, the Challenger Hulk Hogan babyface against champion Nick Bockwinkel. They had great matches there, 82, 83. Yeah. So they were doing that. He actually won the title, beating Nick Bockwinkel in the ring, and people leave the building thinking that the Hulk Hogan beat Bockwinkel for the title. He leaves then leave the building, and next week on TV, somehow the decision was reversed, and then the title was back to Bockwinkel. They did that like twice, 3 times. I think that's when people start losing faith in AWA, though, locally.
They take a completely different route.
I think so. Yeah. And Hulk Hogan handled Vern Gagne business real well. That he drew a lot of people, and AWA was booming in Midwest, not just Midwest, but not just Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, North Dakota, South Dakota, or Winnipeg, but they expanded to Salt Lake City, the Denver, and all the way to San Francisco. Remember, AWA territory gotten so much bigger around that time period. And the main event was Nick Bockwinkel against babyface Hulk Hogan. So Hulk Hogan was doing Hulkamania thing years before Hulkamania, which was very interesting. I mean, those portions of history is so overlooked. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, it's good that it's available now. You can watch it pretty much whenever if you have New Japan World. I'm sure you can pull things up.
Or WWE Network. WWE Network has AWA Archive now too. So if you are interested in the real history of it, because people only know WWE version of wrestling history, right?
That was kind of like the second act, the part 2 of his career, but part 1 of Hulkamania are in those years. I mean, he was really popular.
Yeah.
He was wrestling probably his best in-ring matches
around that time period.
His whole career. I mean, yeah. I mean, you could see where he got his routine. Because by the end, I'm not saying that in a negative way either. It's just all he had to do was do his routine, and also, people liked it.
AWA television, Hulk Hogan was already saying that the Hulkamania is running wild as early as 1982. Hulkamania is running wild. If there wasn't the word Hulkamania, there was no WrestleMania. See, the word Hulkamania was there before the word WrestleMania was invented. Yeah, and the partnership between New Japan and WWF lasted all the way to 1985. That the national expansion started in 84, but the actual business partnership between WWF and New Japan lasted all the way till like summer of 1985, and that time period, Hulk Hogan's last appearance with New Japan for the next 7 years was June of 1985. He came back as WWF champion and defended his title against Fujinami, but he wasn't wearing yellow boots and yellow trunks. When he came back to Japan, even after WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 1 was March 31st of 1985. So 3 months after that, he had this black trunks with Ichiban on it. He didn't wear yellow wrestling boots. Instead, he had a silver boots. So he had this Japanese attire. Then he came back to Japan and defended his title against Fujinami as WWF champion. But shortly after that, all the WWF talent was pulled from New Japan. It says Vince McMahon said no more Japan tour. And all the WWF talent stopped coming over. Everybody was gone, but under the giant. And that's when New Japan had to sign deals with people like Fritz Von Erich, World Class, and Kevin Von Erich and Kerry Von Erich started coming to New Japan. And also Sakaguchi went over to Bill Watts and started bringing people like Steve Williams and young Rick Steiner and whatnot. And they had to sign deals with other companies at the time. So people like Konga the Barbarian, the young Kokina, before
Yokozuna.
years before he was the Yokozuna. Yeah, all these younger, like the Punisher, Dice Morgan. Later on, he becomes Undertaker. But all those younger, big body, heavyweight talent had to be recruited to Japan because that partnership between New Japan and New Japan and WWE was pretty much finished at that point. Yeah, so they went separate way.
Unbelievable thing about that in retrospect is that during that year, 1985, Hulk Hogan was champion. He was working in both in WWE, WWF, and New Japan.
All the way to like summer of 85. Even after WrestleMania 1.
Would that be like if Roman Reigns was IWGP champion for half the year and would spend half the time in Japan and then comes back and does SmackDown?
Happen.
It sounds pretty insane, but that's Hulkamania. That's, I guess, where it was probably at its...
And personally, I'm pretty sure the Hulk Hogan took Japan deal seriously. He was superstar in Japan years before he was like a larger-than-life superstar phenomena in America. After this WrestleMania 1 period on, that the WWE became the world. That's the whole wrestling world. And Japan is like an isolated world, And pretty soon, interestingly enough, that we'll cover that in Giant Baba episode, the legacy, but Giant Baba cut the tie with American company too pretty soon, because NWA was no longer big family territory thing that all these existing company in America is closing their doors right and left, right? It pretty soon became Vince McMahon's WWF against Jim Crockett Jr.'s NWA Crockett promotion. Then pretty soon NWA Crockett promotion becomes WCW. Then you have late 80s into 90s, big two major league companies period in America. And Japan, All Japan, Baba's All Japan, Inoki's New Japan, all existed separately. Yeah. So that the landscape, really changed around that time period. 80s, mid-80s, late 80s into 90s. It completely changed. Yeah.
I think right in the middle, 85 is where what you're talking about with Hogan, and the relationship between WWF and New Japan ended.
I was already back in Japan, and I visited Hogan at the KO Plaza Hotel, and he was willing to have Japan tour, but that the business deals became different. That he had so much, schedules and other projects, and Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan was the it thing, for next 6-7 year period. That it was the prime time WWE, era, and then Hulk Hogan was the top talent. WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2, and the SummerSlam, and that the SummerSlam being created, that the Survivor Series being created, that the Royal Rumble became created, that the closed circuit is no longer, that the business model has changed into pay-per-view, and that becomes late 80s thing. And it just, American wrestling and Japanese wrestling became two different things. Two different industry almost. Yeah.
And it's funny because Hogan became definitely the face of that generation of pro wrestling then, and Inoki stayed a part of the face of Japanese pro wrestling until a little bit later.
Yeah, a little bit later. But the aging Inoki was not popular, at end of 80s, yeah, because Fujinami, Riki Choshu, Akira Maeda all became main event within New Japan and wanted to have a single match program, right? And that's the only way. But instead, Inoki chose Masa Saito to be his opponent all the way to like 1987. See, IWGP tournament in spring, like I said, Hulk Hogan won the inaugural, tournament winner in 83, but 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, that the tournament existed for another 5-year period between 83 and 87. And at the end of 1987 tournament, the final was Inoki against Masa Saito, and Inoki, of course, naturally won. And IWGP became championship belt instead of tournament. Now you have the 33, 35-year history of IWGP tournament all the way to Kazuchika Okada, but the inaugural, that the initial heavyweight champion, the IWGP became championship belt was spring of 1987. Inoki was the first champion. That lineage all the way to Kazuchika Okada for 35-year history. Now there you have it. That now the rest of the history, rest of the story kind of thing.
It's an ongoing story too.
Yeah, but the IWGP heavyweight title has that kind of rich history. And also the beginning, there was a big project that all the Japanese fans in early 80s really believed it was going to be the biggest thing in wrestling.
The IWGP.
Yeah. And people thought Inoki, in the first tournament, Inoki was going to, people thought that, he was going to beat Hulk Hogan to become the first winner of IWGP. Therefore, he will be the biggest thing in wrestling. Instead, Hulk Hogan beat Inoki, and there was like another Inoki's very creative booking, don't you think?
With the DQ finish?
No, Inoki was knocked out of the apron.
That's right.
Yeah, and then Inoki went straight to the hospital, and it was in evening news. It's still up to debate if it was Inoki just decided to lay there, or was there an accident that he really hit the head hard in the ring and knocked unconscious, and it's just up to debate even to this day that he did not tell even Sakaguchi about it because everybody panicked in the ring and he wasn't acting. Everybody panicked and ambulance was called. Inoki was put in ambulance, went straight to the hospital. It was in the evening news. But was it still doesn't say it was really like the big accident or anything like that. A lot of people still think Inoki decided to lay there and without telling anybody about it. I mean, that's like one of the biggest mystery in modern wrestling history. That night, June of 1983, that the finish, the way Hulk Hogan panicked in the ring, it signifies that I don't think he was told. But it's up to debate. I mean, I don't have the answer either. Isn't that interesting?
Very dramatic. It's pretty controversial too. I mean, it's one of Inoki's few on the record losses. Technically, he's only lost to a handful of people.
You have to think what ifs though, because what if Inoki won the initial inaugural IWGP tournament in June of 1983 to become the first tournament winner to be the IWGP tournament winner? That will be like the end of the story, right? But he made it very much of like the episode 1 by losing that match. IWGP became even bigger, by losing. So, my vote is that Inoki all by himself decided to lay there. I don't know, really, because it's still up to debate to this day. Was Inoki really knocked unconscious? An ambulance was called. It was in evening news and also the regular newspaper next morning that Mr. Inoki had an accident in the ring and he was knocked unconscious and went straight to the hospital. That took place too. Yeah, as a record. Yeah.
Do you think that if Inoki had won or went over
IWGP turn,
either that, or in any other, it doesn't have to be in that format. If there's any situation, if you step back and think about it in a more from this time period, if Inoki let Hogan get over on him or not, if Inoki just controlled the program Do you think Hulkamania would have happened? Do you think the trajectory would have been different?
Well, sooner or later, Inoki against Hulk Hogan. See, 82, 83, up until then, that Inoki and Hulk Hogan was tag team partners, winning the tag team tournament 2 years in a row, right?
So there was
And-
history. There was some history between them.
Yeah, and as of the beginning of this IWGP inaugural tournament, Hulk Hogan became single competitor and won all the tournament matches and became the finalist of the tournament. And then naturally, Inoki was another finalist, and Inoki against Hulk Hogan, the tournament final, big match. And if Inoki won, it wasn't going to be that big of a news, right?
He won. If Inoki won, yeah, I mean, what would
It's
it
just
have done
another tournament.
Yeah. And I think maybe fans would have lost faith because, listen, there was another really hot company
Because
right
3
across the
years
street.
in making an IWGP myth and all the legend and the storyline, all young fans believed in Japan at the time that IWGP was going to be the biggest thing in wrestling. And Inoki won and ended. That was the end of it, probably. And by having Hulk Hogan go over, and Hulk Hogan became larger than life in Japan for one thing, and he wore that initial, very original IWGP championship belt in that ring, and the photo exists. And yeah, Hulk Hogan to this day think I was the original IWGP champion. That's true, right? And also, following year, 1984, the second IWGP tournament, again, Antonio Inoki against Hulk Hogan was the final. He already won the WWF championship then, though. You know what I'm saying? Remember, January of 1984, Hulk Hogan beat Iron Sheik to become WWF champion, and Hulkamania and the national expansion era already began. But Hulk Hogan was still taking his Japan dates. He was still traveling back and forth, back and forth. When he was in America, he does this yellow trunks Hulk Hogan Hulkamania. When he comes back to Japan in 1984, he still wears black trunks with Ichiban on it and part of New Japan. So he almost lived double life for like another 2-year period.
That was kind of normal for a lot of superstars that were traveling back and forth, right? They would
Up
kind
until 1984, yes. Yeah, like
Yeah.
Adrian, I asked Adrian Adonis, he told me that his contract says Japan deal is separate. Yeah. But after 1985, the real WrestleMania era began, and Vince McMahon pretty much stopped everybody from coming into Japan. So that was interesting. Yeah. But for the record, that 1984 second annual IWGP tournament final was again Antonio Inoki against Hulk Hogan. This time, now superstar Riki Choshu along with Masa Saito ran in and destroyed the match. And had a double count finish, and people got so mad, and they had to restart the match, and had another double count out, and people got so mad, start throwing things in the ring, and Hulk Hogan, Riki Choshu still did the running and gave big clothesline to Hulk Hogan, and Inoki, quickly went back to the ring and beat Hulk Hogan with the count-out finish, and therefore Inoki won the tournament. People got so mad at the Sumo Palace, they start the fire. Another big historical riot.
It was
People were
crazy.
so enthusiastic back then, huh?
Yeah, they were fired up.
Japanese fans, because they don't boo you because you're a heel. Japanese fans will boo you because they don't like what they're seeing. It's two different things.
Right.
Yeah. But interestingly enough, that the Hulkamania started in America already in 1984, but Hulk Hogan was still making, that pretty frequent trip to Japan and work in two different places at the same time. Yeah. It was a very interesting era to study.
It was kind of the last of that sort of era for, I guess you could say, free agent wrestlers, because he wasn't locked up until 1985 or after that with the WWF.
Right. And it won't come back until 1990 when they had the WWF and New Japan and All Japan, three company combined and had the Tokyo Dome Wrestling Summit. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about that at the final episode of Antonio Inoki, episode 5. Because, I think we covered a lot of ground today. And I think he had a lot to do with today's history, too.
I think it's another dense one, but we've made it. We're almost there. So next time we'll pick up around
we're almost there.
1985.
But we still have to start the Giant Baba legacy on until Inoki retires. Inoki retires in April of 1998, and that was the last time he had the real wrestling match in that ring with full gear. And also December of 1998, Giant Baba has his last match in his life. So both Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki had his first match in September of 1960, and both Inoki and Baba had their final match in 1998. I don't think it's an accident. It's kind of like their destiny. Yeah.
All right, we'll cover that.
Huh?
We're going to cover that on the final
Next
episode.
Time. Yeah. We'll skip some years and eras and episode back and forth. I'm hoping that the people will follow by listening to what we're talking today.
I hope we can fit the rest of his career into an episode too, because from late 80s, well, we're going to have to talk about a lot of non-wrestling situations Inoki was in too. He was very, there's nobody like him. There's no...
being a politician,
being a politician,
for the
businessman.
Yeah, and then he saved the hostage from Iran and all that things.
Yeah,
we'll have that. And also had of all places, he had a wrestling extravaganza at North Korea with 130 people in that building. Inoki against Ric Flair thing. Yeah, we'll cover that.
Okay, we got another action-packed episode, so get ready for it next time.
When he had the North Korea 180,000 people thing, Inoki wasn't exactly active wrestler. He was a politician. He came back a couple times a year in his working shape just to have 1 or 2 matches a year. That was like that for the last 5 years of his career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but acting, like a full-time wrestler, Inoki's career practically ended around 1988.
And there was a famous match with Fujinami too around that time.
Yeah, August 8th, 1988. IWGP Heavyweight Champion Fujinami, Inoki was a challenger, and they did a 60-minute classic. We'll have that next time.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up. So where can people ask you questions online?
On Twitter, Fumihiko Dayo, Fumihiko Dayo, Fumihiko Dayo on Twitter, or just Fumi Saito on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, Fumi Saito 2001, but I'm not in there that much. I prefer Facebook.
I'm at Justin M. Knipper on Twitter. Get at us through Twitter. Get at us through the Patreon. Get at us.
Yeah, let's take questions. Yeah.
If you have any questions on Inoki Baba or anything, shoot them at us. We'll take them. So, okay, let's get ready for the final part next week. So, for Fumi.
So long from Tokyo.
I write that down. I write that down.